Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela, and I am thrilled to have you all join me here today. Thank you for liking and subscribing. As usual, if you love the podcast, make sure that you're doing that. Um, there are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. And for today's guest, that moment reshaped not only her world, but her voice. Katie Rizzo has spent the last 15 years teaching anatomy and biology, guiding students through the intricacies of the human body with both precision and care. With two master's degrees, one from Yale University and another from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, her career has been grounded in science, structure, and understanding how life works. And yet, when loss enters the picture, even the most carefully understood systems begin to unravel. On September 17th, 2024, Katie lost her firstborn son to addiction. What followed was a journey she describes not in clinical terms, but in something far more visceral: pregnancy. In her forthcoming memoir, The Trimesters of Grief, releasing October 6th through Kohler Books, Katie reimagines loss in something that grows, shifts, and transforms. From the nausea of early grief to the numbness that follows to the moment it becomes visible, impossible to hide, her experience challenges the way we think about mourning. And in the midst of that pain, something unexpected emerged. Katie began writing poetry for the first time in her life, an attempt to reach across the veil to speak to her son. And when the weight of grief became almost unbearable, a piece by Nick Cave offered her a turning point, an invitation not to escape grief, but to let it sit beside her. And now Katie walks with that grief, not behind her, not ahead of her, but alongside. And she's opening a conversation about loss, addiction, stigma, and what it means to survive the unimaginable. And today she joins us to share her story, not just of loss, but of transformation, resilience, and the language we find when there are no words. This is a conversation about grief, of course, but also about love that absolutely refuses to disappear. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the beautiful introduction.
Yes, well, your story is amazing and I think very inspirational and will provide a lot of hope for the people who are listening. So I appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. And I'd like to start by you just maybe giving us a little bit more background about just how you were able to move through all of that. It sounds so heart-wrenching, heartbreaking what happened, and yet somehow you were able to find a way to process it, and you're still working through it, I'm sure, but it's like you found a way to move through that and live a life again. Tell us
Mm.
how you're able to do that.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been easy, obviously. I I'd like to give a little bit of credit to Al-Anon. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a
Yes.
support group for people who love somebody with addiction. And our son had struggled for about 5 years with a pretty good dependence on opioids.
Mm.
And he had the genetics for it. He played soccer and had a lot of injuries and was given a lot of opioids, and it just turned into a perfect storm. So, Al Anon was a place where I kind of learned that we weren't alone. So, that September, Nicholas ended up dying 7 days between my birthday and my husband's birthday, which is just kind of
Wow.
bizarre. But um, I had some background into who I was, um, that I'd already experienced a little bit of a loss with losing the perfect son image I had or the perfect family image I had. And I knew that this was a possibility. It wasn't one that I wanted or that I really honestly believe could happen, but I knew it was a possibility.
Mhm.
So when it happened, I had a pretty good support system. I had my Al-Anon people who I could call right away, and I didn't even need to say a word. They knew and they came. And so I think a part of living with grief is being able to share it with people and having a support system. I noticed right away, and I knew right away from Al-Anon that I needed support groups. And so I, started Googling, support groups for people who lost a son, and there are horrifically a lot of them out there. Um,
Mhm.
and I started finding people who looked really lost. And my husband and I went to a support group where there are a whole group of really sweet, kind, loving parents, but all of them had losses like 14 or 15 years prior.
Mm.
And it really floored me. And I love my son, and I do not want to be that lost in 15 years. And not that they all were lost, and maybe that's good for them, and maybe that's their path. I just knew it wasn't mine. I didn't want to be sitting around wishing that things were different. I mean, how can you not? But, or like feeling guilty for when I was happy, or refusing to move on and being mad at other people for moving on. So I knew I had a lot of work to do, and I knew I needed to scramble, and this was life or death for me. Like I needed to figure out some steps in order to kind of stay sane.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that what you're saying about the support. It's like you go out into the world looking for someone who's going to tell you that you're going to be okay,
Yeah,
that, you're going to be able to get through this, and
right.
that you're going to regain some kind of, normalcy or something.
Yeah,
And when you see people who have been grieving a really long time, and like you say, everyone's journey is different, and sometimes we need a lot of time.
right.
Um, but I knew too that I didn't want to be in that space
Yeah,
forever. I knew that it was going to take time. I knew that, it was a big loss.
yeah,
Um, but I just also knew that I didn't want to live the rest of my life mourning.
yeah,
And so yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying, and I understand it. And I know it's hard for some people to grasp that, because I think there sometimes is some comfort in staying in the grief and continuing to do that. But I feel like, yeah, we make a choice, and I understand. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. And so I feel like also I have to say, like, oh, I'm not. I looked at my grief as being these three discrete stages, trimester 1, 2, and 3. And it really rang true for me because I feel like it became really clear that birth and death are kind of two sides of the same coin for me.
Mhm.
And that I got to be there at Nicholas's birth, and that horrifically I had to be there at his end. It really, it felt so much like they have this universal similarity. And in the first trimester, when I was just sick to my stomach and nauseous, and my head was 5 times bigger, and when I was in a room, I just didn't feel like I was in the same room.
Mhm.
That was one phase, but the phase that I feel like I could have gotten stuck at was the second trimester when everybody was going on with their lives, and even my husband in some ways would say like, oh, I'm so glad that things are getting back to normal, and I would be like,
Mm.
there will never be a normal.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I was in that period of just, getting into bed, pulling all of Nicholas's old smelly clothes around me that, his workout clothes, and just laying there for hours in the dark. And sometimes I can still get there, but it wasn't a place that I wanted to stay. And I know that Nicholas didn't want me to stay there. And I heard a psychic, and I don't know how you feel about psychics or if they're real or not, but she said that she was doing a reading on somebody, and the woman said, "Is my daughter happy?" And the psychic said, "Your daughter is happy when you're happy." And I don't know if that's true or not, but
Mm,
it gave me this freedom of like, okay, this
yeah.
isn't working for me, obviously, and it's not working for Nicholas either. And it's not to say my life is great. I mean, it's definitely, there's this huge hole,
Yes.
and I'm going to live with this hole. This
Mhm.
isn't moving on. And that kind of led me to the third trimester where I was like showing by telling everyone I was writing poetry and posting it on Instagram like a lunatic and on Facebook. And I mean, I was a teacher, a high school teacher, so I had lots of people, lots of my former students were following me, and I'm sure they were like, what happened to this woman? She has become unhinged. But I really needed everyone to know.
Yeah.
And if somebody would say, "How are you doing?" I would give them like, "Meh,
Yeah.
I'm not great." And then if they asked why, I would tell them it was like I needed everyone to know that I had this grief baby. And I feel like that's what grief is. I feel like grief is half my love and half Nicholas's. And it's messy and it's angry and it's beautiful and it is love. And it's also all my expectations and the things that his brothers are never going to get to do with him. And so I was carrying this grief baby, and Nick Cave, who, if you don't know who he is, which I think everybody does, but he lost two sons, and he's a beautiful artist and musician. And he talks about asking grief to leave your body and just sit with you. And I felt like that was him telling me, through the void, Katie Rizzo, deliver this grief. So I tried. I sat down and I said, "Grief, I don't want you to leave because that's unrealistic, but I'm going to just ask you to sit here." And so I picture what it looks like in the mornings. And sometimes it's this baby orangutan that will just hold on to me with crazy hair. And sometimes it just decides to rip up a room and it's just mad or crazy. Um, and I just try to, tend to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. I think that that's so important that you put it in a space where, you're tending to it. It's there beside you,
Yeah.
and you're able to um, separate it in a way so that it's not controlling you,
Yeah.
but yet you're attending to it. I love that. Yeah. I think that your analogy is right on. I really do. I think that it's a really neat way to explain that whole process. And I've come to know grief as a process. I feel like we it's really a God-given process to help us through all these times where we have to let go of things, and where everything changes and we have to somehow accept that and move forward. And I think that this process is what helps us. And so inviting it, and having it sit beside you, I think is so important because we can't push it away. That does not work. And yet, the emotion is there. It's
Yeah.
gotta, it's gotta come up,
Yeah.
and you tending to it. I love that. I love the
Yeah.
way that you talk about. So how do you tend to your grief?
Well, first of all, I try to live in the moment and say, where are you right now? Um, and last night I watched the end of Shrinking too. I don't have you watched that show?
No.
Oh, it's a lot about grief, and oh, it just got me, and the music and everything. And I got into bed and I just pictured, this little orangutan with me, and I snuggled in and I thought about Nicholas. And um, my grief really needed some time to really be honored and thought about. And But I got up this morning and I was feeling a little bit lighter, and more connected to Nicholas, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's beautiful. Um, I try to write a poem every day. I never wrote poetry before, and I was a scientist. I really liked, you know, facts and data and numbers. And poetry is so the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So I'll try to see something each day and then write about it and connect it to Nicholas or my grief or what's going on. Um, this morning it was about a jacaranda tree, which we have here, which bloom in the desert, and they're so beautiful. And I thought about how beautiful Nicholas was. So there's that. Um,
Mhm.
My husband is a scientist, he's a physicist. So he took up the guitar after Nicholas passed, and
Wow.
he took lessons. He actually has performances with 7 and 8 year olds, little kids, which are hilarious. And he plays guitar now to Nicholas. So that's kind of one way that he'll sit down and play a song to him. Um, I think that also just taking time with other people, that community thing is really important. I'm in a lot of grief groups for people who have lost kids to addiction. I know you have some grief groups. I was like, man, where was she? I didn't find you soon enough. And also exercise. There's something to be said about
Mm,
metabolizing your grief. I know that's like a big buzzword, but it is true. And as a former teacher, I know you're a former teacher too. I
mhm.
tried to write myself an IEP, and it was like, okay, if this is life or death, I need some kind of a system. And that was every day to write poetry, every day to exercise, no matter what, like whether it's walking with the dogs or um, lifting weights, something,
Mhm.
um, at running, screaming, that can be exercise too, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
and being with people.
Yeah.
Colin Campbell, who wrote Finding the Words, I'm sure you've read it. It's such a beautiful book. Or Colin, maybe his name's Colin. He writes about saying yes. And so for a long time, that's what I tried to do when people said, like, let's go for a walk, or
Yeah.
do you want dinner, or, let's go do this. Because my first instinct was to say, no, I'm going to stay here and just isolate. And that
Mhm.
never leads to somewhere good, right? I mean, sometimes you need a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
How do you
So
tend to
true.
your grief? Yeah.
Yeah, well, very similar ways. And it's interesting that you bring up the exercise because um, there was a little period here in the winter where it was cold and I didn't get out for that walk. And I was feeling a little down,
Yeah.
gloomy, and there was no good reason to feel that way. I mean, everything in my life is
It's the
going
same.
smashingly well, but but um it was still hanging over me. And I noticed when the weather got better and I started walking again, I went, "Oh my goodness, this is
Yeah.
what I was missing." And what a difference that makes. So, yeah, I didn't even realize it. I mean, when I was alone, I made sure that I always got that walk in.
Yeah.
And yeah, just didn't realize the significance of that. And also, I think, yes, grief has to be moved.
Yeah.
Um, Energetically, somehow you need to move those emotions through your body. And I think, all the talking and expressing are great. And you also need to move.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's called somatic healing. It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
that motion. Yeah.
We went on vacation just recently, and I was on the plane, then we got into a car, then we got to the Airbnb, and then the next day we did, nothing movement wise. And I got really down and I could feel my grief.
Mhm.
It felt like I was just going to blow up. And I was like, can I not leave home? Is this
Yeah.
the message? And I was like, no, I'm not moving. And I feel like my like grief orangutan is just gonna just tear up this room. I was going crazy, and it felt so much better just to go outside and take a walk, it just immediately I felt like, okay, things
Hmm.
things are better. I'm a little less insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you've both picked up these creative things that you with your poetry and your husband with the guitar. I think
Yeah.
that's another really key piece is to having something, and it doesn't have to be artsy. I always think, cooking is creative. Um,
100. Yeah.
gardening is creative. There's lots of things that we can do that can help us express, I think,
Yeah.
what we're feeling. Yeah.
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 It's interesting. I have a friend whose son was just murdered, and
Mm.
she wanted to go for coffee. And I was like, yes, for sure. So we went to coffee, and she looked me in the face and she's like, how do I make this better? Tell me it gets better. And you were talking about that. And it's such a terrible thing to have to say to somebody. Like, it's more about accepting what is here now. And
Hmm.
this is where you are. Like, do you remember those poems when maybe you didn't have these in Canada, where it's like about when you get pregnant and you think you're going to Italy and instead you go to Holland, and the analogy was you were going to have a baby with Down syndrome, and Down
Mm.
syndrome is beautiful in its own way. It's not Italy, it's Holland. And I feel very similarly, like you're traveling somewhere new and it's not where you want, and it's certainly not ideal, but you're there.
Yeah.
There's no way you can't get that back.
Hmm. Yeah. And so then that's where, you know, that choice comes. So how do you want to be in this space? Because you
Yeah.
really there's no way, like you say, you can't go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing because we often will resist that and continue to want to go back. And
Yeah.
that's what kind of keeps us stuck is that continual wanting, which is absolutely normal. And accepting that and being able to make a beautiful life where you are is the way through. And like I say, not easy, but but
Yeah.
doable, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
My husband likes to say, we're going to move through this. And I'm like, I'm not moving anywhere. I am staying here and I'm
Mm,
just going to accept it. I'm not like ready to go anywhere with this.
right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, we talk a lot about sitting with our grief and sitting with those emotions. And I think that's really important um, because they don't process on their own. Like we have to do a little bit of work with them.
Yeah.
And our natural tendency is to push those away. They don't feel good. It's,
No, I feel it's awful.
yeah, yeah, it's absolutely,
Yeah.
um, you can go to some really dark places. And so that support becomes really, really important
Yeah.
when you're struggling in those spots. Yeah.
Yeah. I can think of a dark space. Can I share with you?
Yeah, for sure.
So my son went to college in Colorado and in Grand Junction. And one time I was, pretty early in grief, I was driving past where he went to college, and it's very far from my house, so 12 hours away. So it's not like I usually go by there. And
Mhm.
I was alone and stuck in a car, not moving. And I go past where the turnoff is for his college, and I cannot tell you how much I lost it. Like it hit me like a billion bricks that he was gone, he wasn't there, that all this beautiful potential was lost, and it was devastating. And I called my sister and I tried to share with her, and it just didn't work out. And yeah, I think she was in the middle of something, I don't know. But like an hour later, I was still driving. She called and said, I was thinking about Nicholas in Grand Junction and I had a memory about him. And she said, I don't think you know this one. And she shared that she and her husband Matt had gone to visit Nicholas in college, and they had taken him to some fast food restaurant where they had an all-you-can-eat French fries. And he kept ordering another thing of French fries. And she's like, and he was getting sick. We were like, stop. And she's like, it was just such a silly, goofy thing of his. Um, but I ended that phone call and I had been seen. My grief had been heard.
Yeah.
I got a new memory from Nicholas, and I don't know, it made the dark places safer. Like I know now I can get through those, and maybe there'll be like a glimmer of Nicholas in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And how beautiful, I think some people are afraid to tell those stories just because they may remind you of
Yeah.
your grief, the sadness, and it's like we don't forget. So you're not,
We're
we're
carrying it
not.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know I found a lot of comfort in those stories too. Actually, surprisingly, I didn't expect that
Yeah.
myself,
Do
but
do you have
yeah.
one you want to share?
Yeah, well, there's several, but I think I'll share a little bit about meaning. What's coming up here now in my mind is the whole making meaning out of their life.
Mm,
And Blaine always really loved people and he loved hearing their stories.
right.
And I was very much an introvert.
Oh.
And so for me, this is a little bit of a paradox that I am doing this podcast and getting people's stories because that
Yeah.
just wasn't me. But I feel like I wouldn't be in this space. Uh,
Yeah.
there's something that I'm picking up from him, this purpose, this energy of wanting to find out more about people and his love of those stories makes me feel like I'm understanding him more
Yeah.
in doing what I'm doing. And it's given me a whole new perspective on life. It's not meant to be lived in solitude. We're
Yeah.
meant to connect with other people and to hear their stories. And there's so much wisdom out there that I just didn't, I don't
Yeah.
know, I just took it for granted or didn't recognize it, right? Which is crazy now when I think back, but
That's
that's,
so
you know,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah. hmm Yeah, it's beautiful to have um, those memories. And it's beautiful to be able to look back on them with the fondness and the gratitude for the fact that we have them. And
Mm.
I think at first, when I thought back to those different memories, it was really sad. Um, and it would bring up a lot of emotion.
Mhm.
But now I find it really different. It's softer and it's more beautiful, really, than anything. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Um, so before we wrap up, I know you have a lot of wisdom to share, and we've just touched on the very tip of the iceberg. Um, some things that people can do to help themselves right now, like right away, if they're listening to this, what can they start with? And then I want to get your information so that people can connect with you.
Well, these are my 2 cents, and this is what worked for me. Because I remember in grief, I would read grief books, and I'd be like, "This is wrong. Nobody
Mm,
knows anything about grief.
yeah,
This is the worst in the world." And I think that's a stage too, right?
yeah.
Where you just want it's just terrible. One thing is that I learned from Al-Anon is the quote, "How free do you want to be?" And
Mm,
so when something would come up, and still does, when something comes up and I find myself really stuck and I have to think like, how free do I want to be? Like, we had some friends who got married and I did not want to go to the wedding because I didn't want to see a young kid have a mother-son dance? Like that sounded terrible.
Yeah.
And how free do I want to be? And that the kid that was getting married, he was a former, he dealt with addiction. He went to prison for addiction. He and his mom earned that dance. And
Mm.
I wanted to go and watch them and I wanted to witness that. And it was so hard and I wanted to be free. And the whole time they danced, I was like, damn it, Nicholas, you and I deserved this dance too.
Yeah.
So that quote has really helped me a lot. As I've shared, art, movement, being outside, support groups,
Mhm.
and more support groups. Reading books has been really important, listening to podcasts like yours. There's a quote again from, I think actually this is from AA, but it says you can't think your way into action, but you can act your way into thinking. And that was really helpful to me that I couldn't just think, okay, I'm gonna put on my rose-colored glasses and life is good now.
Right.
I had to go out and do esteemable things. So, you know, go and, take my kids to college, to grad school. I have two other sons, and I get to call them on the phone and I get to hear about their life. And um, I get to go visit them and I get to show up for them and not just think about how great it is to be their mom.
Mhm.
Um, I think that it's okay to look at the world a different way and not try to be the perfect Instagram family and admit that, hey, you're a mess. Because I find that the more I just lean into what's going on in that day and kind of live in the moment, the better it is. So if things are not going well, it's better for me to just call a friend. If somebody says, "Hey, how are things going?" Not great. Today's just not been a great day. Or um, the other day we were somewhere and this random woman said, "Oh, where's your husband going?" Because he was leaving in a rush and he was actually going to a support group. And I said, "Oh, he's going to do something healthy for himself." And I thought, okay, I'll leave it at that
Mm.
if she went. And she's like, "Oh, what?" So I said, "Oh, well, actually, we lost our son. He went to, I'm going to
Mm.
think being real is beautiful."
Yes. Yeah.
So those are my
Totally.
2 senses. And I'd love to hear yours if you have a few to tack on to that.
Yeah, well, I like how you say, how free do I want to be? Because I think that gives people permission to step out. And yes, some of these things that we do are really hard. And, there's a little science behind that as well. I mean, we have these neural pathways that have been built. And I love Mary Frances O'Connor's work about, these, how the brain works and how we have these ingrained pathways. You expect, that phone call, or you expect your husband to be home on time, and you expect all of these things. And that's that brain. And it takes time to rebuild those neural pathways. And if we don't go out for lunch, or we don't go do these things, we can't build those again. And so then we remain uh, in those previous pathways. And I think that if you're not a spiritual person, uh, there is some science there to back up the reason why you would step out and try some of these things. And I found myself, some of the stuff that was really hard was going back to the seasonal spot, the camping spot that we went to every summer. I found that really difficult. And yet I knew I wanted to enjoy that again. And
Yeah.
I wasn't going to allow grief to take that away from me. And so I would start out, going a day and then, maybe staying a night, and just eased myself into it. And it took a lot of time, but I started to build new memories there, right, with my kids. And it's doable. it's not easy, but when you understand the process a little bit, it helps. And so I think it's important, when people share their story like you, that people know that there's a way um, to step out and do these things and give ourselves that freedom.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been absolutely delightful. I've enjoyed this conversation. I think you and I have a lot of similarities in our journeys, and yeah, I want to thank you for that. Where can people, I guess, tell us about your books and where they can reach out to you?
Oh, you're sweet. Well, on June 12th, my book, which is mostly memoir with some prescriptive elements, is coming out. It's called The Trimesters of Grief, and it's being published by Kohler Books, and Blackstone Publishing is doing the audio licensing.
Nice.
And it comes out anywhere books are sold on October 6th. And then on November 1st, my book of poetry, None of Them Are You, is coming out as well. So, and those that will
Beautiful.
be available anywhere books are sold as well.
Yeah, so
You
you've
can
been
find
busy.
me, yeah. So you can find me at katierizzo.com. That's my website. You can find
Okay.
me at Katie Rizzo 007 on Instagram. Um, and I like talking to people about grief. So
Yeah.
leave me a note.
Isn't that something that you never thought you would say? I like to talk to people about grief.
Yeah.
And it is just, um, it's the perspective that we have now. And if we can help one person move through, it's it's so rewarding. It's just, I know where I was and you know where you were,
Yeah.
and we know what we needed. And so you telling your story and offering that is huge. So thank
Mm,
you so much for
thank you.
doing this. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And you're such a delight. I love your smile and I love the way that you um, send off this beautiful energy. I think it's amazing. So thank you so
You're
much
sweet.
for being you.
I feel
Yeah.
you, thank you. And I feel like we were meant to meet because we both have a friend in common that we just
Yes.
figured out from
Yeah.
your,
It's
yeah.
so
So,
cool. Like the
yeah,
synchronicities here are huge. And I think that that's, you know,
yeah.
the chemistry that we've got going on this interview. I think people will pick up on that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you ever come to Arizona, I would love to see you.
Yes. Well, I'm sure I'll be back there. It's an amazing
Okay.
place. Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you again for taking the time. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and bye for now.